Hello, welcome to this session. Today we're going to talk about building your own session management framework using ADC. My name is Ronan O'Brien. I've been working with Citrix for 15 years now, exclusively with the Citrix NetScaler or ADC product. I'll probably throw in the odd NetScaler here and there, but Citrix ADC is what it's called today. And from technical capacity, I've worked in a few different departments. So happy to step through some of the my learnings and some of my discoveries that I've worked on. So what we're going to go through today, just some basic assumptions around what we're going to cover over the next 20 minutes or so. The use case background. So I often get brought little questions or queries, can I do X? Can I do Y? How does that work on the Citrix ADC? I'm going to be covering off some of that now over the next 20 minutes. We'll go over some basics as well, AAA, a little bit about how it works, a little bit under the hood, and we'll discuss that. We'll talk about the solution, which is the whole reason we're here, about the framework, some security add-ons, bits and pieces we can do for additional security, and then we do a little demo, of course, at the end. So we're going to assume, to get the most out of this session, I'm going to assume you're familiar with the ADC command line interface. You've knowledge of responder, load balancing, a little bit of AAA perhaps, which is basically applying authentication to traffic that the device would ordinarily load balance. So if we're just load balancing traffic, customers usually come to us and say, okay, we want someone to authenticate, but on the ADC, they don't want traffic to go to the backend server unless it's been authenticated. So we'll throw up a login portal page, we'll authenticate them against whatever factors they have, and then we'll allow it through. A little bit of AppExpert as well. I love AppExpert. AppExpert is how you slice and dice traffic, how we create policies on the ADC. I always talk about policies as, we break it down into two pieces of information. What do you want to do and when do you want to do it? When do you want to do it? That's an AppExpert expression. And what do you want to do? That's the feature that we apply. So it's a rewrite, a responder. That's the action or the active part of the configuration. So a little bit of the use case and background. So where this came from, we had a customer who said that they have users who access an application. So they wanted to put authentication against that, which they did. So when the user hits goes to their usual URL, they suddenly then get redirected to a login page. They put in their credentials. So you can see that there, they log in and then they get through to the back end. However, some of this was going on. Okay, so Mikey turns around and they get locked out, and there were some credentials being shared. So the customer didn't like this. There's a more specific use case around this, but we don't want to sort of disclose too much information. But basically, they wanted to block people sharing credentials around. So what was happening, or the use case, what they would like to see is that when is it Mikey or Bob? Doesn't matter. When they go to log in to the ADC, they have the portal, they put in their credentials. The customer did not want to see the user getting through to the application. Now you think that's something that would be in the product, kind of, a tick box somewhere. And I think it is in the NetScaler Gateway vServer functionality. There is something in there, but not for AAA. Right, so not for AAA, but we have the building blocks there to do whatever we want. It's just not out of the box. So that's what I'm here today, is to show you how to get that out of the box. So some options that were kicked around. We could build it into the N-factor framework. So N-factor is the ability to have an XML blob that describes the login experience. And we can do as many factors as we want. So, two-factor people often talk about, we can do, 15 factors if you want. We can also apply an if then else type of logic as well. So we can check a username, do group extraction and give a different login experience based on the groups that we find coming back. All that sort of good stuff. I'm not going to go into that today. That's, it's been covered before, but we're going to do something else. But that's that's one possible option. Another one is create a third-party tool or have a HTTP call out, take the request and send that to a third party, get it processed, then send it back. So that's another possible solution, which, again, a lot of extra work. We have to go create that or find another solution which will store that session externally. Then we have to check it each time someone logs in. All right. So something else, right? So something else is what we came up with. To understand what we're going to do with this, a little bit about AAA. So how does that work? All requests hit the load balance vServer first. We check for the authenticated cookie. If the authenticated cookie is not there, then we send them to AAA. All right. So if the valid cookie is there, we just load balance the traffic and send it on its way. It's a validated user. If it isn't there, then we will send them to the authentication vServer, that login portal page we saw. We process the authentication, make sure they are who they say they are, and then we send them back to the same LB vServer with that cookie, and then they're allowed through. Right, so that's fundamentally how that works. If we go into the developer tools in Chrome, we can see, and go into cookies, we'll see our NSCTMAA cookie in there, and that's applied to the domain. That's what we're using effectively. Also, once someone logs in, we see the username, and there's also a session key or a session value assigned to that user from the ADC perspective. This is different to the cookie value, right? So it's not the cookie value, but it is unique to the user per login, right? So suddenly we have a few tools that we can play with. So what did I do? We came up with variables and assignments. So this is the piece of the ADC that gives us the functionality. It's a bit like coding, gives us some scripting functionality without having to go off and kind of really, write everything from scratch. I'm using something here called the variable, right? So it's I'm calling a session map. It has a couple of values here, so it takes it's a type map and takes two text values, right? So first text value is 20. That's the username, 20 characters long, and I've set the second value to be 64. So it's usually 32 characters long. So I've put 64 in for double. You can change this to whatever size you want. And I just took in 10,000. We can have 10,000 entries in this table. So it's effectively a 2-column table that we're configuring here, up to 10,000 long. So again, we can change these values to bigger if you need them. You can look in the documentation to see the max values. And this is important here. We have an expiry time. So when it hasn't been accessed or used, that entry will just expire out of that table after 20 minutes, right? 1,200 seconds, 20 minutes. That's typically the standard session time. For online banking and things like that, it's even shorter, so you could change that down if you want. So if there's no activity, then we will take the session out of our table here. We can also, in a similar way, set this expiry value in as part of the AAA session properties. So similarly, if someone logs into a session in the browser through the ADC, does no activity for 20 minutes and then refresh the page, they'll get back to the login page again. So if you align up this value here with what you have for the standard session, that would be the best place, right? This is the action to add an entry into that table that we've configured, right? So we're putting the username in here, AAA.user.login name. This gives us the login name of the user. And we're setting it to be the AAA.user.session ID. That's the value, right? So that's how we get access to that through this AppExpert expression language. That's why I love AppExpert. Just, really easy to get information to get what you want. I'm not doing any regex. I'm not trying to capture strings or the fourth byte in and extract the values. Just there. It's easy to access. We want to be able to delete. So if someone manually logs out, I want to be able to log them out. So I want to clear a particular entry, right? So we're going to associate this later on, and when we go to configure some of the policies. And here's our responder action. So I'm going to add this action in here. This respond with HTML page, no double login. This is in red. You just have to create this first. It's just a standard HTML bit of text that you display for that. So just add that first. And all these lines, by the way, you should be able to copy and paste them in, and they should just work. The last one here, add responder policy. Here's where we're checking that the username does not exist already. We don't want to add multiple entries for the user. So we're first checking that they're existing by saying value exists .not. So this value here is basically saying, does this person, if they don't exist, then we want to add them in. All right. And this is our responder policy. So you can see here, we're adding the policy, block double sessions. So this is what we're going to be bound to the LBV server. We're checking that the user is there, right? So does that exist, right? So, and then we're also saying that checking that the username, that the session ID that's being presented is not the same as the one that's there. So basically, if the username exists and the session ID is different, then we're going to respond with this, right? With no doubles. So that means they're going to get they will get a page saying you're blocked. So that's what happens when someone logs in a second time or a third time. That first entry to go in is the only one that gets to have that. The only one that gets to have the that login page, and anyone else who tries to log in afterwards gets this responder. So we're not actually blocking them from logging in. We're just simply destroying the experience if they aren't that first user to log in. This is a responder policy that we're using to log them out. So we can see here if it contains a particular URL or string, there's a contains. I typically set this to something a bit more specific to do with the application, but we'll see how this is coded in later on. We remove the session from our session table, right? So someone clicks log out, we remove a session. Simple. All right. We need to bind those add session, delete session, and block doubles, these policies. We bind them to the LBV server. All right. So that's a pretty simple bind operation. We can take a look at that and see what it looks like. Let's just drag in our screen here, and there we go. My screen is this way, so you'll see me looking over here. So I can see where I'm clicking. And we look at our LBV server. We also, when someone logs out, we also want to remove the session from the ADC. So there's no point just pulling that session out of the session map. We also have to make sure the ADC no longer remembers that user, and we do that with a traffic management action. So I'll show you that as well in a second. But if you look at our LBV server here, and just want to show you some of these bindings, and we can see our responder policies. And here they are here: delete session, add user session, block double sessions. All right, I put delete in first at the lower numerical priority. So the lower number is a higher priority. So that will hit first. If someone logs out, then we have the add user. If they don't already exist, then we'll add them in. And of course, if they do exist, it'll be the next policy that we will then make sure double check that they do exist, and then we will check the session ID and make sure that it's okay. And if it's not okay, they get the responder policy. We have our traffic policy. This is the logout session. So we can edit the policy, edit, and we can see here, this is the initiate logout action is in there. So that will remove the action whenever that is hit, and I'm using the same, URL. Again, we could do something more specific for production for that to work. All right. There's the session. I'll go back to. There's the traffic action that we have, manually from the CLI. So again, take the slide deck, copy, paste it in, and it'll be fine. Some security add-ons. So we want to capture information when this happens, when someone does log in from a second time and they're blocked. We want to capture that information. Maybe they've opened up another browser, right? It could be something as simple as that. There's no bad stuff happening, but you don't want them having multiple sessions open up with different browsers. So we'll capture that. You can decide how serious it is then if you review the syslogs. So I've created a custom message action here, and you can see I've put a bit of text in here, just to make it look nice in the error logs, to give us something that we can search for and isolate that. We'll also capture some variables. So we're capturing the username. We're capturing the username here. We're capturing the session ID that was used. Just seeing user login attempts. If this user has had loads of failed login attempts, could be that someone's trying to guess the password and they've actually found the password and they've logged in, from a different location. But if this login attempts number is high, then that account could be used, for password spraying. So that's a way to detect that that's happening. And we'll also grab the client IP and we write that out. In order to see this message, I have to turn user-defined messages or user configurable messages on. This command has to be set, otherwise you don't get to see anything. And then I'm going to bind this action to my session policy, right? So I just, I love Responder for doing this. Responder is fantastic for just, capturing events. I can set an action in Responder of no action, and it'll silently, meet a certain condition, and we'll capture a log of something. We capture information about the request. We'll write it out and send the request on its way. The user has no idea that they've been, their information has been caught or captured. But whenever we see certain conditions we don't like or we deem suspicious, we can use the log action in the policy to get that information. First thing we'll do is we'll open up some browser windows. I've got a few here, and I have my putty session. And hopefully you can see the text in that. So we're going to show some sessions. There's one still remaining. All right. There. All good. So if we go to here, and let's just finish this login first on this one. See, I've logged in it's one browser window. And if I go here, there's my session up and running. If I now go to, I'm using incognito mode or private browsing, which means it doesn't access the cookies used previously. So I should get I'll be asked to log in again. There we go. And I use the same username. And it's logging me in. Not sure why that's a bit slow, but anyhow. Sometimes it's slow. While waiting for that, I'll open up Chrome. I'll try that from here. Bang. So I immediately get that. That error message will probably pop up there again in a second. I'm not sure. Could be I've got some weird proxy settings configured. So I can see immediately that pops up. If we look at the log messages. There we go. So that's finally has gone through. If I go to look in here, I can see that the syslog message is there as well. So that has logged that events happening, that duplicate login with the source IP. That's the IP my laptop currently has here on my home network. All right, so that's just a quick demo of what that looks like. If I come along here and log out, right, that's now removed my session entry from the ADC. And if we look at the sessions, I can see 2 sessions here, right? Because there was 3, and these 2 are here. It means that the next session I refresh will be allowed through, right? It already exists. That allows me through. And then my other Firefox window, if I refresh this, it'll continue to give me the same error message. All right. So we saw the event there. If we take a look in ADM, and we go to events, rules, or events, syslog messages, here we go. I can see in here, here's the alerts. So it's found that that has actually, those are the events that happened. All right. So that's it really. Right. So simple framework. Where can we go with that? We have, for example, we can take a look at the, when we do the add NS assignment, we write that entry in. You can set in here, I don't know, the client IP source location. So if you want to say someone can only log in, from the same country, but you will allow multiple logins for that user, but they have to be in exactly the same region. That's kind of a way of doing that. But I guess this just shows you how easy it is to use Responder if you want, for example, to kind of do some geo ring fencing, only allowing users access your applications. You specify the location value in here. You can set up a responder policy just to block that without using any of this here. But we can bolt on additional security pieces to how we protect our web and SaaS-based applications. So to meet the business's requirements and security's requirements. So that's all I have for you. Oh, there we are. This just shows you the location field. This is AppExpert and the little AppExpert developer little pop-up menu that builds out that syntax for you. It's really nice as well. You can see here I'm using ip.source.location, and I have to pass in an integer here. And that integer here gives me, I want to have 2, which means it'll select NorthAmerica.us. You have got the different qualifiers here. So if I were to specify 3, it'd be NorthAmerica.us. I think .state is next, and then .city, and so on. So you can be very specific. If you want to say they have to be coming from the same city, you can do it like that as well if you want. Anyway, lots of other use cases. Build this, use it, take it. Make your applications more secure. Add it on, make it part of your default kind of configuration. Get more security. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great day.